Hello, in this Polity series, now we'll see the chapter Indian Constitution. Recently, the elections have been held for Parliament as well as Assembly for some states, right? In the parliamentary elections, we have chose Member of Parliament, right? They in turn chose the Prime Minister, and in some states, the Assembly elections have been held. They chose a Member of Legislative Assemblies, who in turn chose the Prime Minister, right? And there were also some cabinet ministers who were announced, like Union Minister of Finance Minister, Defense Minister, these all things, right? And deputy ministers. And then we had fun, and we often hear these words whenever we speak about Indian government or Indian political system. We see that their rights were violated, and they talk more often they talk about right to equality, right to freedom of speech, and right to education, right to employment. So these all are the rights that they talk about generally. And there are also some fundamental duties we talk about, like every citizen has to protect their forest and wildlife and protect their country. Like they have to respect respect the freedom struggle. They have to respect the country. They have to respect the animals. Like they treat animals well. So these are all the fundamental duties that a citizen is having. And we have seen the US elections. We have heard about the US elections, right? What happens? Every person in the United States goes and elects a presidential candidate. So whoever wins, whoever gets the majority of the votes becomes the president of US. But it's different in India, right? We go, if it's a parliamentary elections, we go and we elect a member of parliament. We elect a representative to our constituencies. So these people select a prime minister. Like if the majority party selects a prime minister from their own party. So these are different, right? In the US system of elections is different, and the Indian system is different. US system selects the president by direct voting, and Indian system selects the prime minister by indirect voting. So why it is different? Who have framed these rules? So that why are we following these rules from several years? Who have framed these rules? What is the source? So all these rules and regulations are compiled in a book called Constitution of India. Okay. So everything from A to Z, all things are compiled in the Constitution of India, right? That is the only guide and source to the functioning of the government in India. So what does it describe? We'll see step by step. So it describes the rules, how the government should function, right? And how the elections should happen, and every procedure is written in the Constitution. And just the government forms it. It's not that it can perform according to its will and wish. It has some ideals. It has a picture of ideal society. So it has to function in that particular in that direction, like giving equality, giving welfare to the people. So all these are the ideals written in the Constitution of India. Every government has to follow these ideals in order to bring a ideal society, right? And the type, like we have seen, the presidential and prime minister, right? India is not following the presidential form of government. It is following the parliamentary form of government. So we elect the prime minister. Okay, we also have president, but he is a nominal head. So president of US has much power when compared to president of India. So all these rules are also written in the Constitution of India. Then nature, country's political system. Like you see England or Britain, they have a monarch. A monarch will be ruling, like Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth II. So these are the monarchs. There are hereditary kings and queens. They are ruling the kingdom. But here we have the elected representatives, right? President is elected by the people of parliament, and we elect the prime minister and member of parliaments, right? So ours is different. We have a different parliamentary, we have different system. We don't have monarch, we have a republic type of system. So the country's political system is also written in the Constitution. So we are following it. Okay. So when we elect a government, we elect the representatives and they elect a government. They elect a prime minister or chief minister, and they form a government. So the authority lies in that particular government. There is a chance that they can misuse their power, and they can form errant laws and practices that can be harmful to people, or they can show their authority or dictatorship in a particular way that can harm the people or that can harm the minority people, anything, right? So there can be a chance of misuse of authority. So in order to curb the misuse of authority and to put a limit to it, the constitution also has some rules so that there will be no misuse of authority and there will be the correct use of authority always. Okay. And if suppose in your class there are number of boys like 20 boys and 4 girls. So you are going, when a decision has to be taken from the class. So boys all have one particular decision, say decision A, and you have a particular decision called decision B. Suppose you are going to a sports period and you girls wanted to play badminton and boys wanted to play cricket. So when the teacher asks what game you wanted to play, so all the 20 boys will shout cricket and all the 4 girls will be shouting that we wanted to play badminton. So as the majority is more, the teacher will select the cricket, right? Because the majority is more, the choice of majority will be prevailed. The voice of girls will not be heard. So that same thing that happen in a country. Like majority, it may be caste, it may be religion, it may be any kind of community, right? There will be majority community and there will be minority community. So the interest of minority, just as here the interest of girls has been denied, the same way the interest of minority can be denied due to the majority choices. So in order to curb this particular inequality between the majority and minority, constitution also has given some principles that minority, the interest of minority will not be denied, they also will be protected. Okay, that is the main function of constitution. Like save us from ourselves, this is one of the interesting fact. Like constitution helps to save us from ourselves. So whenever we are taking particular decision, we tend to ignore that particular decision is either harming the country in a long run or harming the people in a long run, right? So these constitution provides some rules so that we can check our decisions before implementing them. So whenever we take a decision, whenever we take a practice, so we refer to the constitutional practices and we see that, okay, whatever we are doing, is it legal, is it moral, is it ethical, and is it important for the nation, like is it good for the nation or not. So we take decisions consciously, right? So that is also main function of constitution. Okay. So why this idea of constitution has come up? When this constitution was created, so India has been a British colony for several years, as we know. So after free India, like when the idea of free India has come up, so we thought that these British rules are not applicable to India because India is a diverse country with many religions, many communities, many languages, and we have north, south, east, west. Everything has a different religion, right? Different kind of rituals, practices, and different laws and traditions, right? So we want a holistic constitution to be built so that everyone will be, we have to form a one size fits all kind of constitution so that everyone will get equal justice and equal importance. So that was the main aim of the constitution. So we thought we ourselves have to prepare a constitution, right? So for that sake, Constituent Assembly was formed in the year 1946 by M.N. Roy. Okay. His idea was to establish a Constituent Assembly. So it contained across almost 300 members. Right. So why? What is the main aim of a constitution to be formed? That is because the huge diversity India offers, and there are different states, right? And at the same time, India and Pakistan got partitioned, right? The interests have to be served to all the Indians, right? Majority, minority, all the religious communities, everything was disturbed. So in order to put them in a particular place, so Constituent Assembly has formed and the constitution work has put up. So he is known as the father of Indian Constitution. Who is he? Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, also known as Baba Saheb Ambedkar. He is known as the father of Indian Constitution, and he has compiled the constitution in a very beautiful way that all the laws and regulations and all the policies that they have taken, they are even valid now in this changing political system. Right. So now we'll see what are the major roles, like major ideas that the constitution has given us, right? So we have seen in the center we have parliamentary elections and we have assembly elections. Right. In the center we choose the member of parliament. Right. They represent your constituency in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha. Right. And whatever party forms a majority, say if there is a party A and there is party B. So if party A has got majority seats, then party A forms the government. So they select one of their party member as prime minister. So in that case, we select the prime minister. What is the duty of prime minister? He rules the whole country as a whole, right? He sits in New Delhi and he looks the affairs of all the country, right? And then we have assembly elections. So we select the member of legislative assembly. So what is this legislative assembly? Every state, like most of the states, have this particular thing called assembly. Just as the parliament is for center, we have assembly for the state. All the policies, all the regulations, all the acts are passed in the assembly. So these MLAs, we elect the MLAs. For every constituency, we will select the MLA, and the same thing. If party A and party B, if party A gets higher majority, they elect the chief minister from their own party. So chief minister rules the state, prime minister rules the country. So we have seen, if there are separation, or like the state has their own control and center has its own powers. Like if any decision regarding to the state, like any welfare scheme has to be brought up, any educational scheme has to be brought up, or anything, any agricultural scheme has to be brought up, that can be taken by the chief minister. He need not go everything to the prime minister. He can take the decisions in an autonomous way. So the decisions is taken by the chief minister for a particular state, and the authority also lies with the chief minister. So here and some of the important things like defense, atomic energy, space, so these things are under the control of center, and some important decisions have to be taken to the center, but most of the decisions are taken by the chief minister for a particular state. So states can have their own power, and also there is a separation like states and the center. That particular feature is called as the federalism in Indian Constitution. This is the main feature that the Indian Constitution is offering. It is not unitary, it is federal in structure. That means state also have the autonomous powers. Okay. Then we have so we have come across the prime minister, right? Prime minister, member of parliament. We have a parliament, right? And we have parliament has two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, right? House of Peoples and House of Commons. Like there are two different houses, right? We have the elected representatives. Here are the nominated representatives, right? And also we have the president, who is a nominal head, right? And before independence, when British was ruling, they were also elections. Elections were held and the people voted and they got the representatives. But what happened? Only very less percentage of people voted, because they need to have some special characteristics in order to get the voting right. That means they need to have the property, they need to be rich, or they need to be in upper caste or something like that. And women, until 1935, women are also not allowed to vote, and labor was also not allowed to vote. Only some parts of people, like some parts of the society, were given the right to vote. Even other countries, when you see, women were not given the right to vote till after many revolts and revolutions, the women were given the right to vote. But so what happens is, people are denied, people are neglected. So women and other people their choices are neglected, and only some person's interests are being encouraged. So in order to solve this problem, Indian constitution makers have come up with this concept called universal adult suffrage. That means any person who is above the age of 18 can vote. If it's man or woman, or if he is poor, if he is rich, if he belongs to an urban family or rural family, anything, he has the right to vote. Just he has to be above the age of 18. Everyone is given the right to vote, right? This was the policy they have brought in the constitution. So this is called the parliamentary form of democracy. That means democracy because we are voting, and by the form of universal adult suffrage, right, above age of 18 everyone can vote. So we are following parliamentary type of system, and we are electing the people. So it's a parliamentary type form of democracy. This is one of another feature. First we have federalism, and then we have the parliamentary system of democracy. And so we come across different union ministers like Union Minister of Finance, Union Minister of Defense, and Home Minister, Agriculture Minister. So we have different ministers. They are called the cabinet ministers, right? And they belong to the parliament. And other type of members of parliament are also present who are not a part of executive. They are just a part of parliament. Okay, so these people who are called the cabinet ministers, or they function under the prime minister. Okay, so they are called the executive. That means they execute the functions. Whatever policies have happened, whatever policies that they have discussed in the parliament, that policies are executed by the cabinet. They see the day to day what are happening in the country and how to formulate these particular policy, and the execution of policy is mainly taken up by the cabinet. And all people belonging to the parliament are called the legislative. So they take the legislations on particular policy, on any kind of particular issue. They bring up the issue, they form a policy, they pass the acts, they pass the bills, right? They form the policies. So they form the policies, they discuss of policies, and they enact it, they execute it. So these are called legislative, and this is called executive. And we have come across this term called Supreme Court, High Court, District Court, Civil Court. What are these? They are the judiciary. They are called the judiciary. So we have three different organs of the government. They are executive, legislative, and judiciary. Executive executes the policies, or the function executes the policies, and legislature formulates the policies and discusses them, and judiciary is to check the judicial power of it has a judicial power. It enforces the law and order. It sees that the law and order is maintained in the country. So one of the main important feature of constitution is that it provides checks and balances between these three organs. What is checks and balances? So it is not that the executive can perform in its own way, in its own will and wish. It is responsible to the legislative. It is answerable to the legislative, like what it is carrying on, how it is carrying on, where it's giving its budget and all, everything. It is responsible to the legislative. Okay, it cannot do in its own will and wish. It has to be answerable to the legislative. And the legislative or the parliament is not free to formulate any kind of policy, right? It has some rules and regulations that it has to follow. So it has to abide by the constitution, it has to abide by the fundamental rights, it has to abide by the directive principles, right? It has to serve the interest of majority, or it has to serve the interest of minority, right? Not only majority, also minority, right? Minorities' interests are not to be denied, and it has to provide equality. So all these things have to be kept in mind while formulating a policy. So in this case, if any policy is violating any of these particular constitutional feature, then judiciary can come and take an action. It can say that this particular act what you have formulated is constitutionally invalid. So that is the important function of judiciary. So constitution gives these theory of checks and balances. That means one organ can provide, like, check the authority of another organ. Like judiciary can check upon legislative and executive, legislative can check upon executive. So there is a particular, there will be a limit, and there are the checks on from one organ to another organ. There are checks. And what is balance is that the three can function independently. Judiciary can function independently without any political pressure, and legislative can function independently, and executive can function independently, right? So they are given independence, they are given separation of powers, and also at the same time they are checked by each other organ. So this is the beautiful concept of checks and balances, and this feature of constitution is called as the separation of powers. Then we have See, if you're a man, if in a particular organization, you are not given a job because you are a woman, or in a particular place, you're not given a home, or you're not able to buy a home because you belong to a lower caste, or in particular firm, you're not given employment, or now you're not given any kind of opportunities because you are from another religion. So if this happens, there is a lot of exploitation happening, right? In order to curb all these things, there is a right to equality for all the citizens, no matter what are you coming from, like any caste, any gender, any religion, any place of birth. So you will be given the equality in all the cases. That is the main, that is the right given to the citizens. And also you'll have freedom of speech, right? You have the right to live, and you have the right to employment. That means you have the right to speech. That means you can express your like opinions or any kind of expressions in a decent language. You are not restricted from any of those things. And you have the right to live, right? And you have the right to and right to employment, on the basis of you one cannot discriminate you on the basis of caste, gender, or religion. So you have the right to equal opportunities of employment, and you are free to follow any religion. So the nation India does not discriminate you or does not restrict you from following any religion. You are free to follow any religion of your choice. Okay, if any of these particular rights have been violated, you can approach the court. That facility is also given. That is called the right to constitutional remedies. So what is this? This total together is called as the fundamental rights, and this is one of the most important provision in the constitution. And then, as you know, we are free to follow any religion. Like you can follow Hinduism, you can follow Islam, you can follow Christianity, you can follow Sikhism, any, you are free to follow any religion, and there is no such thing called the state religion. So the country doesn't have a particular religion for itself. You can follow any religion, and the state doesn't have any religion. State doesn't have any religion on its own. Okay, so it doesn't interfere in any of your religious practices. So that is called a provision that is assembled in the constitution, that is called the secularism, right? So far we have what we have seen federalism, we have seen parliamentary form of democracy, we have seen the separation of powers and checks and balances, we have seen the fundamental rights, and we have seen the secularism. So we'll discuss the fundamental rights in detail, right? So what are the fundamental rights? These are the basic rights given to each and every citizen of India. First is the right to equality. So as I've told you, based on your religion or based on your caste or based on your gender, if you are a man or woman, or if you are from higher caste or lower caste, if you are from Hinduism or if you are from Islam or Christianity, anything, it doesn't matter. You will be given equal rights, right? And the same thing, one of the main thing that the constitution was trying to abolish was untouchability. So in olden days, there used to be a concept of higher caste and lower caste. It is prevailing still till today, but it was very extreme in the olden days before independence and all. So higher caste, they used to have this concept of purity and pollution, right? They used to treat themselves as the purest people, and they used to sense lower caste people as the polluted one or the impure one. So they followed this abhorrent practice called untouchability. So they're not used to allow them in the villages. They're not used to allow them to drink in the wells, or not use any public properties which are used by the higher caste people. They're not allowed to enter into temples and houses of higher caste people. So these were all the discriminated practices that higher caste people meant did to lower caste people. So that, and also the untouchability was a practice. So this year the discrimination was based on the caste, right? So in order to abolish this particular system, B.R. Ambedkar has specially designed this particular provision called right to equality, and no one will be discriminated on the basis of caste and religion, and also gender. Okay. Then we'll see right to freedom. So you have freedom of speech. You can tell your expressions, you can have your own opinions and expressions, right? You are free to tell your opinions in a decent language without using any derogatory words. And you have the right to form associations. You have the like-minded people, or you have to revolt against something unfair, you can form associations or you can form trade unions, etc. You are free to do it. And your freedom of movement, you can move from one place to another in the country, right? You are not restricted to any kind of such movement. You are free to move, and you're free to choose any kind of profession, no matter what your caste is, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your gender is. You are free to follow any profession with this which is ethically, morally and legally correct. Then we have the right against exploitation. What is exploitation? Exploitation means any treatment which is unfair. So it may be towards children, unfair treatment towards children, unfair treatment towards women, unfair treatment towards anyone, or any lower caste people. So anything is considered as exploitation. So we have the right to fight against exploitation. For this purpose, one of the most important step was taken, that is abolition of child labor. So children less than 14 years are not to be employed in any of the factory, any company or any of the work, right? So they have abolished child labor. That is also kind of exploitation towards children, right? So they have abolished child labor, that is children below 14 years are not to be employed in any kind of work. And then we have right to freedom of religion. So you have different religions and you're free to choose any religion, and you're not restricted and not obstructed with any kind of policy or any kind of act that is going in the country. And we have cultural and educational rights. So we have seen majority and minority. So minority are very less in number. So in order to preserve their culture and tradition or their own languages, so it may be language minority, it may be religious minority, it may be community minority, so anything, right? In order to preserve their culture and their own religion or language, they can form institutions, religious institutions or education, I see missionary schools and all, right? So there are minority institutions. So in order to preserve their culture, they can form institutions, they can form educational any religious or educational institutions, and government will not be in a position to stop them. They can carry on their own work. That is the cultural and educational rights. They can form the cultural institutions and also they can form the educational institutions. Right. Then we move on to right to constitutional remedies. So these are the rights given to every citizen of India. If you feel any of your particular right has been violated, you can approach the court. So that is called the right to constitutional remedies. Okay. This particular provision is called right to constitutional remedies. Then we have some questionnaire. Whatever we have discussed in this particular chapter, we'll see in the questionnaire. When was Constituent Assembly set up? 1942, 1946, 1950 and 1956. So answer would be 1950 by the idea of M.N. Roy. How many people were there? Roughly it was around 300 people. Who is the father of Indian Constitution? Gandhiji, Nehru, B.R. Ambedkar. You know, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was known as the father of Indian Constitution. So we'll now match some important provisions of Constitution. No religion is state religion. Every religion has its equal importance. What is this? What does come under? So this is the concept of secularism. And checks and balances. So this is the concept of separation of powers between legislative, executive and judiciary. Each have their own checks and balances. Then separation of power between center and state. The state has its own autonomy and center has its own set of powers. This has come under the provision of federalism. And we have this equality and the freedom for speech or to follow religion. So what are these? The rights given to citizens. So they come under the fundamental rights. So here in today's lecture, we'll meet in the next video.